Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Special Envoy Pedersen. Mr. President, recent weeks have been less turbulent than those that preceded our last discussion, but the scale of the humanitarian crisis remains as significant. Following my briefing to you from Damascus, I traveled to Homs, Aleppo, and Idlib to meet Syrian civilians and humanitarians. As Special Envoy Pedersen underlined, we must seize the opportunity of this moment. These visits underscored three critical humanitarian challenges that we and the people of Syria face. First, the need to preserve and rebuild essential services. Health services, already weakened by years of conflict, have been further closed or scaled back at a time when nearly 15 million people require humanitarian health support. Access to water has been restricted, including by fighting at the Tishreen Dam in eastern Aleppo, affecting water and electricity for more than 400,000 people. And close to 13 million people are still facing acute food insecurity, at a time when WFP has been forced to reduce food assistance by 80% in the past 2 years due to funding shortfalls. Lack of food, water, and power is exacerbated by lack of fuel and liquidity. A second priority, protection of civilians. While many of those uprooted in November and December have returned to their homes, more than 620,000 people remain displaced, as harsh winter conditions arrive in many parts of the country. This comes on top of the more than 7 million who were already displaced. In the northwest alone, 2 million people remain in camps and informal sites. In Idlib, I met some of those civilians at Tajma Alij camp. Most want to return home, but cite a lack of adequate services and infrastructure damage, as well as unexploded munitions. And in Aleppo, I met children injured by the deadly legacy of conflict. Partners have identified more than 100 contaminated locations since late November across Aleppo, Idlib, Hama, and Latakia. Meanwhile, airstrikes have killed civilians and damaged civilian infrastructure. And in the south, Israeli incursions have forced civilians, including children, injured, and residents, to evacuate parts of Quneitra Governorate. A third priority, a third risk, the threat that women and girls will be marginalized. Throughout my visit, I was struck by their determination to contribute to Syria's future. Rayan, a 12-year-old girl in Aleppo who lost her leg to unexploded ordnance, hopes to be a doctor. Zainab, whose husband was held at Sednaya prison for years and who received his death certificate the morning that we met, wants to see her children complete their education. Jamila, raising 4 children alone, wants to pursue a university degree. Syria's future depends on women like Rayan, Zainab, Jamila. Their voices must be heard in this critical period. Mr. President, as the security situation has stabilized, we've been able to resume our humanitarian operations at much greater scale. In December, we sent 298 trucks of aid through border crossings with Turkey, as many as crossed during the previous 6 months. WHO has supported an EU humanitarian air bridge, providing 50 tons of supplies to northern Syria. In the northeast, a cholera vaccination campaign is underway in Hol camp. UNICEF and partners have led work to restore the functioning of the Tishreen Dam and to rehabilitate other water supplies, including the Ain al-Baida station. WFP and partners have provided bread for more than 2.5 million people. Children and mothers are receiving treatment for malnutrition, but we must do more. We will this month roll out a countrywide rapid needs assessment. We are also adjusting our coordination structures to meet the new operational context. Mr. President, as ever, I have three asks of the Security Council. Firstly, your support for the clear assurances that I received from the caretaker authorities that international humanitarian law will be respected, civilians protected, and humanitarian organizations allowed to operate freely. We are continuing our engagement with the caretaker authorities on putting in place new ways of working, including new procedures for registering NGOs. We remain in daily contact on practicalities, and I assess that partnership to be serious and genuine. But security, particularly in Aleppo, Deir ez-Zor, Latakia, and Tartus, remains a challenge. Occasional theft and looting have impeded vaccination support in Homs and insulin supply in Hama. And capacity gaps clearly remain. My second ask, as ever, money, including for the longer-term support that Syria needs. Our humanitarian response is only a third funded. Today, I've allocated from the UN's Central Emergency Response Fund an additional $8 million, for a total of $20 million to support the rapid scaling up of humanitarian operations in Syria. And we welcome recent aid announcements for Syria, including, importantly, from the region. The UN and partners encourage donors to coordinate even more closely to ensure that this support has the greatest benefit, collectively, for people across the country. My third ask, we need to ensure efficient flow of support into and through Syria. This means that sanctions should not impede humanitarian support. The United States announcement of a new general license covering transactions with Syrian governing institutions provides a welcome signal. This also means support for and from Syria's neighbors. Following my visit to Syria, I held practical discussions with authorities in Turkey, in Lebanon, and in Jordan. Operations are continuing at scale through border crossings with Turkey, but cross-line movement remains a challenge in the northeast of Syria. Existing procedures, including for movement of aid workers, have been reinstated at the Lebanese border crossing. The Jabal Nasib crossing with Jordan is also operational, though procedures for humanitarian movements are still being clarified. We are working with the caretaker authorities in Damascus to swiftly establish clear procedures at this crossing and at the seaports. We are also testing deliveries through Iraq to complement existing movements by NGO partners. Mr. President, the active engagement of this Council and the international community remains vital in this period of uneasy transition. We need to act with great urgency and vigor. Above all, and all power to Special Envoy Pedersen's elbow, we need the peaceful political transition that will help us to reduce humanitarian needs. We must stand with the people of Syria at this time. The humanitarian operation can make great impact if we are serious, bold, and committed in their support. Thank you.